Texas.
Matt, what was so interesting was the atmosphere down there on our Saturday show. I was just simply trying to be nice, understanding where I was. So I said something like, even though Billy Napier is struggling and his job is apparently on the line, the fans down here still really like him. And they started booing me when I said that, chanting, "Fire Billy, fire Billy." And I'm like, so that was the students' attitude going into this game. Obviously, all fans want to see a win, and they got it. And it was not unpredictable because Texas has been a mess for the entire seasons. But yeah, now we're right back to where we were last year. Like, what do you do with Billy Napier? And there's 3 losses. They had a 4-game stretch where I didn't see how they were going to win any of them, even though Texas looked like the easiest. Now they go to A&M. And if that loss goes down, it's 4 because they blew the USF game. And I'm just simply doing the math. It was a great win for the program. I'm not sure how much it means.
So it's a good point because, look, my stance on Billy Napier is, and I'll say this about the guy, like when he's doing his sideline interviews, he's doing his media interviews, he comes off as just so likable. And he's a guy that you're like, this is someone you want to root for. And that remains the same this morning. He's recruited well because he's got some young pieces in place. They've had some inexcusable losses where I think the hot seat started to get warm and then a little bit more. I've gone on record as saying last year's 8-5 season's as good as 8-5 as you're going to get. But Paul, if we're going to be honest about the Florida situation before we hop into the Texas one, based on what they have, you said they're at Texas A&M, who got a nice win last night against a scrappy Mississippi State team. They go Mississippi State, Georgia, Kentucky. You can win Mississippi State, Kentucky. And you end the season with Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. Let's just say things were just cakes and pies in Gainesville. How good was this team going to be record-wise with that schedule to begin with?
About what we saw last year. And that's why that USF game was so significant, because it upset the apple cart. But now he's gotten that one back, and he's going to have to keep getting games back to survive. It's the atmosphere there. They were already asking about Lane Kiffin yesterday morning. That's standard operating procedure. But I think there's a little bit of optimism now, and there should be. But I wonder how much of this game is really about Florida, Matt, as opposed to about Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no explanation of how inept that program has been, and the only positive thing I saw yesterday was the one play Arch Manning was out of the game.
Oh, you know what's funny about that is that kid came in and he slung a seed for 22 yards when they needed it for a first down. I believe he's a transfer from Troy, one of those Sun Belt quarterbacks that just comes in and doesn't give a damn, a la Joey Aguilar, and just slings it all over the yard. That's for another day. But here's Texas in a nutshell. It's not Sark's fault or Arch's fault when I say this. The expectations put on Texas at the beginning of the season as the number 1 team in the country were just flat out. It was just wrong. They were wrong. They weren't the number 1 team in the country. No one did the work to look at the inexperience that was coming back from Texas. They looked at the glitz and the glamour of the recruiting class and the name on the back of the quarterback's jersey and assigned them the number 1 ranking in the country. Paul, it's evident this is a young team that hasn't played a lot together that needs to find its way, and that's okay. It's okay that they're probably going to be 9-3, 8-4 with a lot of these dudes coming back, and then you can go on a run. I just don't understand. Like, this is who Texas is, and that's fine this year.
Well, I'm not trying to change subjects on you because I was at the tip of that spear, but you could say that about another school too, and I will get to them in a minute. But it just shows you, Matt, how wildly entertaining and how meaningless the preseason is.
Yeah, I say it all the time. Like, I think preseason polls are absolute garbage because you get out there, people rank the teams on last year's bona fides, And they don't sit and look and be like, well, there's a lot of receivers lost to the NFL. They lost some defensive guys, and Texas still has a really good defense, but this is what they don't have. Okay, so let's look at that. And let's look and see how the roster's been turned over and see what they got pieces in place. And no one did that. So everyone's sitting here like, oh, Texas is the worst thing. They're not. They were just put 1 year ahead of where they're going to be. And so it's an upset. But again, ask anyone going into that game, like Florida's going to win that game. Both teams are coming off a bye. It was Arch Manning's first SEC road start. And I think what happened, I don't know, were you surprised?
No. I mean, really, if you follow college football, you could not have been surprised. That didn't stop a lot of people from reading from the hymnal and saying, well, I think Texas is going to win. And it really had a lot to do with the game ended up being about Texas, but the predictions were based on how bad Florida has been, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, well, it's college football. None of it makes sense. I mean, Jerry Neuheisel was the story of the day as an interim offensive coordinator, 33 years old, and was getting carried off the field. So, and that to me was outstanding. But that's college football in a nutshell. Let me ask you this before we move on, because it's starting to become a pet peeve of mine. Do we really think, and again, when we say this is going to live in perpetuity because it's going to be on the internet. Do we really think, let's say that things don't work out for Billy Napier. Why do people in Gainesville think that Lane Kiffin wants to come to the Swamp? I know that's the name that's always connected to it. The man's happy in Ole Miss, and he's winning with Division II quarterbacks, and they may go to the playoff.
Comes down to a couple of things. I talked about this with Steve Spurrier Friday. He wears a visor, and he was a Steve Spurrier fan growing up, and his wife's his ex-wife's father was a starting quarterback at Florida. Those are the only reasons I can tell you. And I think a year and a half ago, Lane Kiffin let it be known that maybe he was interested, but by the time the job didn't come around, I think he was happier where he was. So it's a conundrum, Matt, like everything else that we talk about, based on very little fact.
Yeah, it goes to and you and I have had this conversation, and it begs to be talked about again, because we're going to get to another game here in a minute, that when this day and age in social media and chatter, when you throw all in on one guy, right? This is the guy we want. This is the guy we want. Lane Kiffin, Lane Kiffin, Lane Kiffin, Lane Kiffin. Well, if Tom Smith gets the job, then it's not Lane Kiffin. That guy starts already with a strike against him because he wasn't the big shiny toy that everybody wanted to begin with. And therein lies the issue with, like, I'm telling you right now, the Arkansas opening with Sam Pittman, which happened after, I believe, were we on last week? They all went together. We were sleeping.
Right after we went off.
Yeah. So the Sam Pittman situation in Arkansas, do you know how many names have already been connected to Arkansas, which have been, so what if it isn't John Sumrall? What if it isn't Rhett Lashlee? What if it isn't John Gruden? Like, it starts this conversation of, you guys just name three guys that probably aren't going to take the job. Maybe Rhett will because of his connection to the program, but it's just, we get into this conversation. It just, let it breathe.
I had a fan approach me Friday and said, you know, who do you like? And I go, I don't know. I said, who do you like? He said, my top two choices are John Gruden and Ed Orgeron. I'm like going, okay, good. I mean, and by the way, yeah, Orgeron, the farther he gets away from his coaching days, perhaps the more, I'm sure he's already gone through all his money, so he might need the job. I don't know whether he's hireable. And Gruden is an enigma, Matt. There's so many things out there about John Gruden. Can you parachute him into a college football program? He's never coached. I'm not trying to compare him to Belichick, but Belichick couldn't look any more clueless. Is Gruden going to be better?
Yeah. I mean, look, he might infuse a little more energy into a program. Belichick always looks like he's half awake from a nap. Belichick permanently looks like I feel on Sunday mornings with no sleep, permanently. Yeah, it is. It's funny. Like all these names that come about. I'll give you one thing before we move on to actual games. You know what program I could see kicking the tires on Orgeron, which I think would be a fascinating story? Remember when our pal Lane Kiffin was dismissed? Who was the interim coach who thought he was getting the job at USC?
It was Ed Orgeron.
What job is open in LA that just happens not to like USC?
Across the street?
UCLA. If there was ever a moment where they wanted to infuse some energy and everything in between, that'd be an entertaining hire. But that's just for message board fodder, just to throw some chum in the water for people to enjoy it. Let's move back to the games. Alabama, Vanderbilt. That was the revenge game for Alabama. Last year, Vanderbilt gets the win. They get up in this one 7-0. They pick off Ty Simpson. They're moving down the field to go up 10 or 14-0. Diego Pavia turns it over in the red zone twice. And Alabama, say what you want, they got another win. Kalen DeBoer now 13-2 in ranked versus ranked matchups.
Yeah, to me, this was a game, and everyone wants to tell you their favorite Diego Pavia story. And maybe I'm too old school because I really like him, but I think he talked way too much. He's a really good player, and he likes to play with a chip on his shoulder. But he set himself up for failure in this game by running his mouth. And it's one thing to talk trash; it's another thing to be confident or cocky or even arrogant. I mean, he was just downright disrespectful, and he paid for it yesterday.
Did you like that he attached himself to Johnny Manziel?
Well, it's a good connection. The only difference is in 2012, in that very same stadium that Manziel was hanging out on Saturday, Johnny Manziel delivered. Diego Pavia did not.
Yeah. And look, and Alabama continues to kind of just plod along little by little, getting the wins that they need to get. And ultimately, they're going to be judged in the next few weeks. But it was a big win for them to get it home, especially when it looked like Vanderbilt. I'll say this for Vanderbilt, 7-5 a year ago. Great story, great ascent for the program. They looked like a better team than they were last year, and they were in the game until Pavia turned over. And you're right. Look, he ran his mouth. Probably didn't go well, but Alabama gets the win there. Texas A&M, they got a nice win against Mississippi State. I said this on College Football Final. I want to ask you about it because I don't think there's a quieter, sixth-ranked, undefeated team in the country than Texas A&M because they're just kind of winning and no one's paying attention to him. But here he is, Mike Elko's second year. They're undefeated, and yet no one's really saying much about him.
No, I think some of it is they have had good, meaningful games, but not marquee games. The Notre Dame game was marquee, but Notre Dame is a little bit off Broadway this year. And, beating Auburn, beating Mississippi State, and then they have Florida coming up. I mean, so they're what I like about them, they're being tested against good teams. And down the road, I'm not sure how many great teams they're going to have to face because Texas looked like the toughest game on the schedule. Okay, that's already been spoken to. And some of the rest of their games, I mean, they're playing not an easy schedule because they'll be on the road soon, but somewhat manageable maybe.
Yeah. And again, they had this last year. They controlled their own destiny going into the last week of the season to play for the SEC championship. But there's always a team or two throughout the season that's having a really, really good run, and they haven't been talked about yet. We have A&M Florida on ESPN primetime next week, so I'm looking forward to kind of just really digging into them because Marcel Reed, we'll get to know a lot about him. Florida, say what you want. They have the talent. This will be an opportunity for them to show if they can build on this week's win against Texas. I'm purposely saving one game for last because I think we got to dig in on it just a little bit more. I do want to get to Miami, Florida State, because that was billed as the big one, 28-22 the final. The score was not indicative of what kind of game it was. Carson Beck continues to be absolutely outstanding for the Hurricanes. If it were me right now, I don't have a vote for that all-important Associated Press poll, but I think you could argue Miami is the best team in the country as we sit here on October 5th.
I think you have to say that right now because, I mean, they have been tested. Going to Florida State speaks for itself. And I know Florida State lost to Virginia, but that's understandable. But Miami really looked good, and they've been tested enough times that I think it's fair to say they're the best team in the country. And I think, there's a couple other choices, but they've had more opportunity. And I think Carson Beck has moved on from Georgia very effectively and seamlessly. But right now, being the best team in the country doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It just separates you from the best team. And right now, Oregon, Ohio State, and Miami are at the top.
That's right. Those three, they're the class of the country. Ohio State this year has given up a combined 25 points the entire season. 25 points. They go 3 to Minnesota yesterday. The defense has been dominant. Julian Sain doing what he needs to do. Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, they're loaded with weapons. So, right. At this point, being the top 3, we'll figure it out later. Now to the game that was absolutely stunning. And I said it on TV at all of our halftimes after it was done in a college football final. Penn State going to the Rose Bowl as 24.5-point favorites. Statistically and on paper, Paul, was the biggest upset of the year. That's part 1. Part 2, not to take anything away from UCLA and Nico Iamaleava and what happened. I find Penn State's loss to UCLA is inexcusable, and I don't want to hear about the Nittany Lions again as one of the best teams in the country until they win out. They got to win out because they've got Indiana. I don't want to hear about Penn State again until they prove otherwise that they belong in the conversation.
Well, the good news for James Franklin, it doesn't affect his record against top 10 teams. So he caught a break on that front. The bad news is it's not statistically the worst loss of all time. I think probably Southern Cal and Pete Carroll to Harbaugh and Stanford 15, 20 years ago goes down. But it feels like the worst loss I've ever seen. And I think for James Franklin, it is going to haunt him because what does he have to do now? He has to run the straight of Indiana and Ohio State. And what reason would any person have to think he can beat Ohio State and Columbus now? And to have to do that to stay alive, I think the bigger issue for James Franklin is keeping his job. And I know what the buyout is, and I know what his record is. But at some point, you have to determine, can we do better? And I'm telling you right now, Penn State can do better than James Franklin. It just feels like the gas is leaking all over the runway. And that game yesterday it changed the narrative from he can't win the big one to now he can't win the little one either.
Yeah, look, it'd be different if they went in there and it was a back and forth game and UCLA was, let's call it 2-2 on the year. Paul, UCLA was 0-4. They fired their head coach. They just promoted their offensive coordinator, Jerry Neuheisel, I think on Wednesday. And they were bad. UCLA was bad. And they were up 27-7 on Penn State. There's a difference between an upset. I know it ended up close. I know that. But there was a point, Paul, where UCLA was literally kicking Penn State's ass up and down the field.
They were. And, it got interesting at the end only because UCLA is so inept. But the fact that they could get on Penn State just tells you all you need to know. And part of being a good football coach or a great football coach is dealing with adversity. And James Franklin didn't do that. It happens, but it shouldn't. And it's not. And by the way, Matt, it wasn't like they were in a hostile environment either. I've gone past parks on Saturday afternoon that had more crowd noise than what you had yesterday. So there's just no excuse for that, none at all. Until Saturday, UCLA had been beyond embarrassing. They'd already fired the coach. They lost. When they 0-2 in the Mountain. There's just no way you could have ever seen that one coming. And now James Franklin has no more explaining to do because his credibility has been shattered. You had to feel for him a week ago, and he said, "Listen, but not anymore."
Yeah, what surprises me is I'll get into the parallel in a minute, but when you look at Penn State relative to Michigan a couple of years ago, everything was in place for Michigan roster-wise to go on a national championship run. They do. Ohio State a year ago, everything was in place for them to go on a national championship run, and they do. Do you believe, is Penn State out of it? Are you done with them? I'm done talking about them until they prove otherwise, but are you done with them in the playoff picture in this season?
Well, I think statistically you have to be, so how did Penn State end up being the team that so many people thought was the best team in the country? Unlike some of the Texas and Florida narrative, it looked legitimate, Matt. You'd have to agree that they had the quarterback coming back, maybe Of course, the better quarterback may be at Missouri right now, but that's nothing you can do about that. It looked like they had the roster. It looked like they had everything going for them. So I can't explain this because their predictions were not built on just fake hype. I mean, I think it was legitimate.
Yeah, I do too. And that's what's surprising about this. But what if I told you the national champion, they're primed for a national championship run because last year's national champion lost to a top 3 Oregon team and then lost to an unranked team and still went on to win the national championship. Now, having said that, the difference between them and Ohio State is the Buckeyes lost to Oregon, and then they lost their last game of the season to Michigan in a rivalry game, whereas this year, and they had no more games to play. Penn State has more games to play, which could end up in their favor. You can't do that. You just can't do that if you're James Franklin based on what's coming this year.
Yeah, listen, I think it would be pretty foolish just to give them no chance because, I mean, there is a story here. And I still think fundamentally, but by the way, as soon as I say that Penn State could come back, can Clemson come back either? I mean, Penn State and Clemson were pretty similar coming into the season, except one looked a little better, and that was Penn State. But I think there's a narrow path. It's hard to believe, but James Franklin maybe that. Yeah, just as I wrote, and a lot of people were thinking Kalen DeBoer was finished 5 weeks ago. I mean, it's a little bit hard to write anybody off in college football right now.
There you go, James Franklin, your redemption.
Here on CBS Sports HQ, the brand new AP Top 25 college football poll is out. And with all the carnage we saw yesterday, there's a lot of movement to update you on. But once again, Ohio State sticking there at the top after a win over Minnesota. Miami moving up a spot after their win on the road in Tallahassee. Oregon must have had a rough week of practice on a bye, moving down 1 spot. Then you've got Ole Miss and Texas A&M rounding out the top 5. Also, welcome to the top 10, Texas Tech and Georgia. Keep moving down here in the poll. We got a lot of up arrows, but once again, that's because we had a lot of down arrows in that top 10 with loss after loss and a lot of big movers there in the middle. Missouri entering into the top 15. So is Michigan. Georgia Tech up 4 spots into number 13. Tennessee also on a bye week, but benefiting from everything that happened yesterday, moving up 3 spots into number 12. Commodores up 4 spots after losing to Alabama. You got to look at that season in totality. Vanderbilt there at number 20. And the last 5 teams to sneak their way into the AP Top 25. Memphis unranked into number 23. South Florida unranked up to number 24. The Bulls are back in this thing. How about the American Conference? It's something that we're probably going to talk about when we're talking about the college football playoff. But before we get there, you might notice some teams absent. No Texas, no Penn State. That's now 2 losses for an unranked Penn State. No Power 4 wins, 0-2 in conference. Drew Aller was asked about his team's playoff chances after their loss. Here's what he had to say.
Are you guys still in the hunt for the playoffs?
What do you think?
I don't know.
Yes. Who's your guys' team leader?
All right, we got Damian Harris here in studio. Brad Crawford joining us remotely. All smiles here because I think we can all agree that the AP poll voters did the right thing in dropping out Penn State and Texas. But when we look at this from the landscape of the college football playoff, I'll throw it to you because you're getting a little heated. You're saying, why are we talking about an unranked team and the college football playoff? Should we be when it comes to the Nittany Lions?
Quite frankly, we shouldn't be, because if you remove Texas and Penn State from the equation, we would not sit up here at our jobs and talk about an unranked team with no Power 4 wins, with nothing to show for making the college football playoff. So why are we going to sit here and do that for Penn State? There's no reason to. There's nothing that when you watch this team play offensively, defensively, on special teams, this doesn't look like a playoff team. It doesn't look like a Big Ten championship team. And I'm going to go down the road and look at their schedule. These are 4, listen, they can't afford to drop another game just to make it to the Big Ten championship, to keep the hopes alive. So you mean to tell me that we have confidence in Penn State and Drew Aller to beat Ohio State, Indiana, Nebraska, and Iowa at Iowa, which is definitely going to be a tougher environment that he faced at UCLA. We expect them to go 4 out of 4 in those games. No shot. Penn State's not in the college football playoff race.
Yeah, Drew Aller was asked, are they still in contention? And that in contention phrase to me is all relative when it comes to Penn State, because like Damian mentioned, when you consider who this team played the first 3 weeks, that season essentially started with that double overtime loss to Oregon. That was a Big Ten opener. That was a game all of us national analysts were sort of seeing, is Penn State legit or not? Now, a week later, they lose as a 24-point favorite at UCLA. Penn State's 0-2 to start Big Ten play. This is surprising. This is James Franklin's best roster he's had. He was asked about that in LA, and he said, yeah, it's the best roster, but we're 0-2 in the Big Ten and need to fix some things. So the Nittany Lions have to win out to guarantee a spot in the playoff. And as Damian mentioned, it's not going to happen. Even Nebraska is a team on the schedule right now playing better than the Nittany Lions and would probably be favored in that game if it was played next week. So Penn State looks more like an 8-4 type team than a 10-2 right now.
According to Sportsline, their odds to make the college football playoff dropped from 70% before that game to 42% after that loss. So it's not nothing. Sportsline still thinks that there is an avenue for them to make the college football playoff. Brad, I have no numbers to back this up, but I think one of the most Googled phrases yesterday was James Franklin buyout. I'll go ahead and tell you, because I was one of those people as well. It's over $50 million, so might need to cool it there, some Penn State fans. But where is the culpability from him that led to this loss?
Yeah, you know, I'm not a member of that team. I'm not inside the locker room. I can't tell you what the mood is right now, but it ain't good. I can say that. And James Franklin, before the season, was saying we knew the narrative was playoff or bust for this team, and for them to be 3-2 right now with 3 wins over non-Power 4 conference teams and 2 losses to Oregon and UCLA, it's just got to be stunning for him. And, you know, you get back to Week Bruins team, not a team going to a bowl game, and Penn State went out to the Rose Bowl and laid an egg. So, yeah, if I'm James Franklin right now, I'm worried if my team can recover from this. I don't think it can.
Yeah, I completely agree, Brad. And James Franklin, you were there in Tallahassee. James Franklin told me to my face, this is a championship or bust year for us. And then when I look at the weapons, the resources that Penn State has, they've got one of the more experienced quarterbacks in all of college football. They've got Katron Allen and Nick Singleton in the backfield. They got Andy Kotelnicki as their offensive coordinator. They just brought Jim Knowles from Ohio State, made him the highest paid coordinator in college football to shore up this defense that was already good last year. You have talent, you have players, you have coaches, you have resources, you have everything except something to show for it. And that is always the problem with Penn State. Emily, we have this same conversation year after year after year about James Franklin, about Penn State. What does that tell me? That they are not getting better year after year after year. They're staying at the same spot. And I remember the conversation we had with him. Well, we are very blessed to be criticized for winning 10 games and not winning a national championship. Well, when you do the same thing every single year, well, guess what? UCLA, they're a bad football team, but they're getting better. They tried to get better. They went out and got Nico Iamaleava. And, yeah, we can say that didn't work out for the first couple of weeks, but, hey, it sure did against Penn State. All that to say, I can't really tell you if it's coaching, if it's playing, if it's a lack of buy-in from the players, or if it's just every man for himself in that organization right now. But clearly it's not, they're not getting it done.
Yeah, and the critique against James Franklin has been he cannot win the big one. That was not a big one.
I mean, even you, Emily, I sat on here in the show yesterday and said, I'm taking Penn State because what are they? They're bullies. They like to beat up on the little guys and run the score up and just thrash the little guys. They got bullied yesterday, straight up. Yeah,
and it wasn't just a situation of James Franklin telling you that this was a championship roster. He also commended just the personnel in general. You mentioned the coordinators, the fact that Aller has had time with Kotelnicki, which he's had a lot of different offensive coordinators. It's a big question mark. There's another question mark that we need to talk about, another unranked team in college football playoff, putting that in the same sentence. I know you're very happy about that, Damian. So I'll go to Brad first on this one. What do we do with Texas here?
The Longhorns have problems right now, Emily, that are not fixable overnight, and that's a bad thing if you're Steve Sarkisian, one of the highest paid coaches in college football. There's still there's still 4 top 20 teams on this schedule, and that begins next week at Red River against Oklahoma. If we get past all the Arch Manning stuff for a moment, just consider this. Rebuilt offensive line has vastly underperformed. Longhorns defense just got pushed around by an offense that was ranked near the bottom of college football coming into week 6. I'm ashamed to say Texas was my preseason favorite to win the national championship because I trusted the personnel. I thought Steve Sarkisian could kind of mesh this together with all the offseason acquisitions, all the resources and money Texas and the 40 acres put into this too deep, but not anymore. Texas is going to the Citrus Bowl. They're not going to the playoffs.
Yeah, this Texas team has a lot of problems, and I'll go to something that Brad said. This defense got absolutely manhandled yesterday. I mean, to start off the game, Jaden Ball got the football and said, put the team on my back. I'm going to run through somebody. I'm going to run through Anthony Hill's face today. Once I get to the third level, I'm going to stiff arm Michael Tapp and get to the end zone. And that gave life to this Florida Gators offense that they hadn't had in quite some time. And then obviously when you look at the offense, I mean, they're underperforming at every single position group. Quarterback, running back, offensive line, wide receiver. There is absolutely nothing going right for this Texas team right now. And I'm very perplexed as to what's going on with the offense, because stay with me now. Texas is averaging just as many yards per game as they did last year with Quinn Ewers. They're actually turning the ball over less per amount of plays they run this year than they did with Quinn Ewers. Why does it look so bad?
I don't know.
Why? That's not even a question to you. That is a question to Arch Manning, really, because we're going to sit here and talk about this.
Is it just to him?
That's where I'm going. Is it Arch or is it Steve? Well, I have to look at the fact that Steve Sarkisian took a 7th-round QB and went to the college football playoff multiple times, walked into Tuscaloosa, beat Alabama with Nick Saban, and did a lot of things that Arch Manning is not doing right now. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, well, it's Steve Sarkisian's fault, because we have seen from week 1 of the Ohio State game, there's open receivers. They're just not getting the football. So I'm not sitting here trying to say this is Arch Manning's fault. Arch Manning, you are the problem. But what I can say is there have been other guys before him with the same play callers that have had success, and the offenses look much different than it does right now. I
think a lot of times we look at Arch as, well, he's young. This is the 3rd year that Steve Sarkisian's able to work with him, and so I think that's where
people were on social media yesterday talking about sample size. The sample size is too small. Well, guess what? I'll go back to the fact that, like you said, Arch has been there for 3 years now, and he had a lot of opportunities to beat out a 7th-round draft pick at quarterback, even when Quinn Ewers got hurt and they threw Arch Manning in and he had the perfect opportunity to take over the job. Well, guess what? He did not. So the whole sample size, oh, we haven't given him enough time, oh, he's young. Let's stop that. Please.
Damian says no thank you.
No thank you.
All right, I get to ask some fun questions here. So, Brad, I'm going to throw this out to you. Who's in the most trouble between Penn State and Texas?
I think undoubtedly it's Texas. Do we really think that this Longhorns team that lost to a bad Gator squad yesterday can go 3-1 the rest of the way against, let's see, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Texas A&M, all teams ranked inside the top 15 or so? No, they're not going to do that. You have your head in the sand if you think that what we saw on the field from Texas so far this season can all of a sudden reverse course and finish as one of the hottest teams in the country, because that's what it's going to take to make the playoff out of the SEC. The schedule's good enough where if Texas can get on a run and start protecting Arch Manning, he can be more consistent. They show some semblance of a run game. The defense with Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons starts playing. Yeah, if they check all those boxes, perhaps Texas gets back in the playoff picture. But they're unranked right now for a reason alongside Penn State. These are two teams that, despite being preseason darlings, are going to go bowling and not play off here in a few months.
Just do this. Just flip a coin. You want to talk about who's in the worst
position?
They're
both in trouble.
Flip a coin, because guess what? Neither one of them are ranked. Neither one of them really have an advantageous schedule to get them to the college football playoff in the back end. And neither team really has, like, even when you turn on the tape, you can't look at anything from Texas or Penn State and say, okay, well, at least they do this well. And for Texas, it was, well, at least they play really, really good defense. They got one of the best defenses in the country. We didn't see that yesterday. Now, I will say it's Penn State. Just to answer the question and do my job here, I'm going to go with Penn State, and not even because of this year, because of in totality. We've had the conversation ad nauseum. And if you're a Penn State fan, you just talked about a $55 million buyout for James Franklin. He's brought in the best coordinators. He's had the most experienced quarterback. He's had the best backfield in college football. He's had some of the best edge rushers college football has seen, some of the best defenses that college football has seen in the past couple years, and they have nothing to show for it. So at this point, it's like, well, what can they even do better? Who can they go out and get? Who can they go out and hire? What can they do on the field to get better? And the answer just seems like nothing, as long as James Franklin is the head coach.
Texas was the preseason #1 team. Penn State was the preseason #2. That's why we love the sport, is you have to play the games. And there was a big game in Tallahassee last night. Miami coming out on top, and they are now up to #2 in the country. I don't want to rule out anything here, but they don't face another ranked opponent. Where do you think the Hurricanes finish the year?
Well, I think they win all of their games throughout the rest of the way. I mean, we know that they're not facing a tough schedule at the end of the season. I mean, as we look at it right here, I mean, Syracuse, that's going to be a tough football team because Fran Brown, he's a great head coach. He's got the team ready to play, especially in the big games. But Louisville, they're a good team. I mean, what we do know about this Miami team, unfortunately, as good as they are, as good as they even were last year with Cam Ward, the #1 overall pick, they are scheduled to drop one of these games at some point. And if you look at how the game was managed at the very end by the Miami Hurricanes, some of the decisions that Cristobal made, some of the decisions that he made, we can point at those and be like, that's going to cost them against a team that they shouldn't be in a game with, that's playing with a lot of confidence, playing with a lot of grit. You don't want to see Cristobal lose one of those games. And as I point out, that Syracuse game, that's the perfect opportunity, if you ask me.
Yeah, Miami's already beaten 3 top 25 teams. That's the best resume so far in college football. I don't care if the rest of the way they don't beat another top 25 team. I think the game against SMU might be tough. SMU could be ranked here in a few weeks. But that Miami resume here in a few months is going to be comparable to others in that top 4 seed mix. Separated themselves, and it starts with elite defense. You see the rest of the schedule there. I mean, Miami's going to be at least a touchdown favorite in every other game. But as Damian pointed out, there's always the Mario Cristobal factor, late game situations. If it's a tie game, Miami maybe has a 1-possession lead late, and you have to make a proper coaching decision with a timeout situation or something. We need to see Mario Cristobal make that right decision and not cost Miami a bad loss down the stretch.
I think that's why people are hesitant to say this is a national title winning team, is just because of what we've seen. You know, they lost a few games down the stretch last season to lesser competition. And as we saw yesterday, anything is possible in college football. How about the win for your Crimson Tide, Damian? I'm going to make you wait, though. I'm going to go Brad first here. Brad, what does that win over Vanderbilt do to Bama's resume?
Yeah, I think it's a great dub for the Crimson Tide, but this is still going to be a week-to-week deal with Alabama. We have pointed out for weeks, Emily, that this schedule is just brutal. You see there at Missouri next week, Bama's going to be a slight favorite in that game. Still got to play nationally ranked Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma. You go to the Plains at the end of the year, Auburn could be maybe trying to spoil a spot in Atlanta for the Tide. Kalen DeBoer's team is one of the most improved squads here in Week 6 from Week 1 after losing to Florida State. They currently are my number 6 seed in my projected playoff bracket, and I'm fully expecting Alabama to finish with 10 wins. They were opportunistic on defense yesterday. Let's be honest, if you watch that game closely, Vanderbilt played Alabama well, snap for snap, but it was Diego Pavia that made the 2 critical turnovers in that game that sort of changed the outcome. So Alabama's an elite team. I don't think they're national championship caliber right now, but that could certainly change 6 to 8 weeks from now when we've seen them play, 4 or 5 other top 25 opponents.
Well, that narrative can certainly change because Alabama is the one team that we've seen each week from the loss against Florida State. They've done this, and then they've done this, and then they did this against Wisconsin. Now they're here against Georgia. Now they're here against Vandy, and all of a sudden they look like one of the best teams in the country. And I would go ahead and argue and say they are the best team in the SEC as of right now. Not putting the cart before the horse, but what I've seen up until this point, they are the best team in the SEC. And what does this win against Vanderbilt do? Of course, it's a resume booster, Emily Proud. They beat a ranked team, a conference team at home. It's a resume booster. But what does it do for the Alabama football team? They're starting to get back to where they were. They're starting to get back to the Alabama standard, right? The first Week 1 loss, they handled that. They learned from that. They go into Georgia. What do? They beat Georgia just like last year. Well, what happened last season after they beat Georgia? It was the emotional letdown and the surprise of Diego Pavia and his Vanderbilt football team. Well, no, that did not happen this year because they understood that Vandy was going to give give them everything they had. They understood this was a national championship matchup for the Vanderbilt Commodores. They understood what it means to block out the noise and all the people that thought, oh, this is going to be a close game. No, Alabama, they're going to start smelling that perfume drinking that perfume like Bryant McFadden starts to say. But at the end of the day, that was a confidence builder for Alabama. One, because it's a team that beat you last year in an embarrassing fashion, but also when you look at what this Alabama team is and you think about the Alabama standard, not only are they playing to it, but now they're getting a sense of we don't take side notes to nobody. Diego Pavia practiced taking a knee in pregame warm-up yesterday. I'm sure some guys saw that, and some guys even had some comments about Diego Pavia after the game. I won't get into that, but all that to say, it looks like Alabama is starting to get back to Alabama again.
Yeah, the question was, can they stay up after that Georgia win like they weren't able to last year? Well, now they have to keep staying up because they go to Missouri and they have Tennessee, and so you got a lot of ranked opponents ahead. We'll see if they can just keep on going. All right, Brad, I got one more question for you because we saw some chaos in the Big 12, which is what we expected. Iowa State losing on the road to Cincinnati. What does that do to the Big 12 race?
I would pump the brakes on the Bearcats being a college football playoff contender right now. I know they're unbeaten in conference play, but they've won consecutive one-possession games. There's a lot of fluctuation going to happen at the top of that league. I do think Texas Tech right now is a clear-cut front runner. They've been our projected favorite at CBS for months now. And right now, Texas Tech is better than the top of that conference at the line of scrimmage, especially on defense. What Joey McGuire has done has been phenomenal. But Cincinnati's win over Iowa State, you got to give the Bearcats credit. I mean, to have a huge lead like that, get up in the first half, and then Iowa State nearly come back there in the fourth quarter to hold off a then unbeaten Cyclones team. Very good win for Cincy, but let's see what happens the next few weeks before we're penciling in the Bearcats as one of those Big 12 playoff contenders.
Yeah, Brad, you're absolutely right. And I'm right there with you. I think Texas Tech is by far and away the best team in the Big 12, but that's just right now. And have we seen parity more in any other conference in the Big 12? Absolutely not. So, just like Brad said, I'm going to give the credit to the Cincinnati Bearcats because this was a huge win for them. And it can be a resume booster as we go throughout the rest of the season. Listen, we don't know what's going to happen, especially in the Big 12, but that's what makes it so fun, the chaos, the parity, and we got to see these games being played, Emily Proud. You just talked about the number 1, number 2 preseason ranked teams are now unranked. We don't know what these Cincinnati Bearcats are going to do. We don't know what Iowa State or Texas Tech is going to do. We just got to watch it all unfold. But I will say the Big 12, that's a really fun conference to watch.
Super fun conference. It's fun when you don't